Okay, how many times a day do you think you're marketed to? Probably a lot more than you think. There's things like college shirts, posters, on the back of t-shirts you get, all of those. They're ways that companies market to people. They advertise because there's a high chance that a lot of people are going to see it. And the same goes for billboards over highways. There's so many people that go down that road. It just gets them a lot of exposure and increases the chances that people are going to buy their brand or look into it. So sporting events serve as a perfect opportunity for brands to get their name out there and get the exposure that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get. It works great because there's obviously thousands of people and they're sitting there. So they're not just passing by, or if you're driving down traffic, you might miss the billboard, but in an arena or a stadium, you're sitting there and you can see it continuously, and it's more likely to stick in your head. So hence we have sports marketing. So my name is Katie Deutsch, and this year is my second year in ISM. I'm a senior, and I chose to take ISM again because I love the dozens amount of opportunities that I have been presented with, and I think it's a great way to figure out what I want to major in. So Winston Churchill said, "Success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm." I chose this quote because I think it really reflects ISM itself, because you're gonna encounter obstacles. The first person I asked to be my mentor this year said no, so that's just an example. But you still have to go about things with the same amount of drive and energy and not get discouraged. My mission statement for the year was, I want to expand my knowledge of the field of sports marketing and improve my skills of time management and public speaking, so that they will benefit me regardless of my major. So first I'm going to talk about my research. The first thing I researched was the breast cancer campaign. So the article was called "Think Pink Going Strong" by Joe Favorito. And it works so well because it's so universally known. When you see pink in sports, you know it's related to breast cancer, not because, it just doesn't really fit in otherwise. Like, you don't see a lot of teams that their colors are pink or anything like that. So when you see it, especially around Mother's Day or in October, you know the purpose it serves. And it also works really well because it's not limited to just one league. Like, it's not just the NFL that does it. It's just not the major leagues that does it. It's all across the board. So here I kind of went a little overboard with the pictures, but there's, they have it on the bases, they have the hats, the catcher's got it on their gear. So there's all sorts of different ways that they incorporate it. There's the gloves in the NFL and hockey. So as you can see, it's seen all over the sports industry. My second research assessment was about the ways that the sports marketing industry is about to change forever by Mark Fiedelman. And it talked about the effects of technology on sports marketing. So it really emphasized how the amount of advertisements is going to increase exponentially. Because you can see them online, you can see them anywhere. Even the things like the billboards, they're able to flash through different ads so you can see more than one on one individual board. And I also talked about how the most effective ways of advertising are through the players themselves. So for example, Jordan Spieth, he just signed a huge deal with Coca-Cola, and they're going to sponsor him, and he's going to promote them. So it works really well because people pay attention to these athletes. People pay attention to athletes like LeBron James or Tom Brady, really anyone you can think of. And by getting them to promote their brands, they get a lot of exposure because people are going to want to mimic them. They want to say, oh, well, if Tom Brady uses these headphones, I bet they're good, so why shouldn't I buy them? And so this is going to change because now there's programs that can do that electronically for you. They can run it through an algorithm or whatever, and it'll say, okay, you want to market these shoes? Well, here are the athletes that would be good to partner with because people go with their choice of shoes or things like that. So it takes out the human factor, sort of, so where people don't really have to do it themselves, and the programs do it for them. So by doing this, it takes away the risk. You have a lot higher chance of people seeing what you want to promote and having it be successful, the campaign not going unnoticed or things like that. Okay, so next I had a research assessment over our trip to UNT. So my first class was Marketing Foundations, and we talked about the product life cycle. So all things, all products, everything that's sold goes through life cycle. It's introduced, and then it kind of increases, and eventually it plateaus to where sales and like recognition kind of even out. It's not like really growing anymore, but it's not necessarily on the decline yet. So, you know, things that are kind of plateauing right now, I would say, not technology itself, but like cell phones, like they're here, they're not really increasing in popularity because most people have them, but they're certainly not on the decline. Things that are declining would be like VCRs, yellow pages, things like that that you still see, but they're not very common. The next class was global marketing, and we talked about the challenges of selling to international markets. So this one itself didn't really apply to sports marketing particularly, but it was still really interesting because it talked about how there's language barriers, there's culture barriers, things that can really prevent you from having a successful market in another country. So for example, Gerber, the baby food company, they wanted to expand their market to Africa. Well, in Africa, a lot of the people there are illiterate, so they can't, when people sell things, they have a picture of what they're selling on the can or on the jar, whatever it's contained in. So when Gerber took their products to Africa, they had their little baby face, like they normally do on the lids or on the side of the jar, and it may have been squash or peas or beans, but it wasn't part of their culture to have it just written in words. They looked at the picture, so they kind of thought they were selling babies in a jar. So that didn't really work out well. And it kind of just goes to show how much you have to research the market you're aiming to sell to, and you just have to double check everything. My third class was professional selling. Here we really talked about how you would market to different personality types. So you wouldn't go up to someone who's very analytical and, you know, detail-oriented and start, you know, talking about them to their family, making small talk. You would do that to someone who's more emotional and just kind of expressive in that sense. So we talked about just ways to stay on track. You know, you can get a sense for what kind of personality the person you're selling to or pitching an idea to has, and you can base your presentation off of that. So you can give one that's very detailed or one that's like related to, I don't know, like their children, and you can bring that up often, how it would affect them. That was really interesting because it was really something I never thought of before. There's like the personality chart we used. And last, I did a research assessment over marketing to female fans. So the article was called 10 Major League Baseball Teams That Are Scoring with Female Fans, also by Mark Fiddleman. So the Major League Baseball in general has a much larger female fan base than any of the major league teams, bigger than the NFL or the MLS, anything like that. And specifically in the MLB, the Texas Rangers have the largest percent of female fans. So this is really neat just to see that a team so close was doing so well in the sense that they were attracting women fans. So in this article, it talked about ways that the teams were able to attract the women, even though, you know, you think the sports industry is predominantly marketed towards men. So they talked about how they did like the Fields of Fashion, which is like a question and answer with the wives of the players, and they also have a fashion show. They also do a wine tasting, and if their schedule permits around Mother's Day, they always do a really huge celebration. So that's really neat, and I never really thought about how different it was. I just kind of thought they were applicable across both genders. But if you think about it, it really makes sense to do things for the women as well to get them more involved. Another thing that was really neat was the Phillies. They have the wives of the players create a recipe book, and it's called Traditions Made Healthy with the Phillies wives, and they have all these recipes that they're healthier alternatives to things, and it sells really well for them. It works really well. And I think the Astros, they also do like a baseball 101 program at the field each year. They invite anyone. It's geared towards women, but anyone can come, and they sort of, they get to meet the players, and I think they probably do a little mock game, and they teach them about kind of the general side of baseball, not to help them understand so they can get more into it, things like that. Next, my interviews. I had 8 total. My first one was with Katie Young. She is the Director of Corporate Recruiting for Learfield Sports. She really emphasized to me that, first what she does was she finds and recruits the talent to fill positions in marketing or media at the 114 schools that are represented by Learfield. So they own the media rights to all these schools, so it's their job to fill the positions that are vacated when it comes to advertising or sponsorship, things like that. So she really emphasized to me that connections are super important. The way she got her job here was someone she interned with when she was in California said, "Oh, I know the guy who runs this. Let me get you an interview." So it really just helps you get your foot in the door, and it can get you really far if you have good relationships with people and use that to your advantage. One thing she also said was that a dream job is doing what you love, where you love, or your family is going to love, and where you can create significance and leave a legacy. This is something she keeps in mind when she is looking for someone to fill a position. She wants to make sure that they're going to be filling this position for a while. It's not going to be vacated again after a year because it causes more issues for them, and if they stay, it makes their job easier. So I had a really great interview with this. She also gave me a little marketing proposal from Montana State to a taco company, and I used this to help me sort of format my original work. So it was really helpful. Second, here's some pictures of the place. It was really neat. It was brand new. There's just kind of some of the helmets. And those are all the schools that are represented by Learfield. So as you can see, they're all over. There's 114 of them, as I said. Next, I had a second interview with Becky Kimbrough, and she is the Vice President of Marketing for the Texas Rangers. She works with the team and is in charge of their branding, their advertising, the media, whether it be radio ads or television ads, things like that. So it was really neat to learn that the Texas Rangers are one of the only teams in Major League Baseball that don't have an outside agency or advisor do their advertising for them. So it's neat to see how their program or their marketing division is interworked with all the other ones, whereas for most teams it doesn't really have a lot of contact with the other programs like public relations or things like that. It's less interworked with each other. She said that she's constantly getting approval from them and using their advice or working things that they want to include into their marketing or branding. If you follow baseball, you might have heard that the Rangers slogan this year was "Never Ever Quit." And I didn't know how they got to this or how they came up with this branding or this slogan, I guess, to use for the year. But when she told me the story, it was actually really neat, and it showed me how you can get ideas from anything. So it came when they hired their new manager, Jeff Bannister, and when they were checking him out, they were looking at his online profiles, and when they were looking at his Twitter, they noticed that a lot of his tweets ended with the hashtag "Never Ever Quit." And this came from how, when he was a kid, it was his dream to play in the major leagues. And he wanted so bad just to be a Major League Baseball player. And he was really good. He played baseball, and when he was about 12 or 14, something like that, he was in a really bad car accident, and he was almost paralyzed, and they said, you really shouldn't be playing baseball anymore. And he said, "No, I can't give it up. I have to make my dream come true." And so he kept playing, and when he was in college, he was diagnosed with bone cancer. So he was going through chemo and things like that for about a year, and they said, you really need to stop playing baseball. It could cause you a lot of harm. And he said, no, I can't give it up. That's the one thing that's keeping me going through this. And eventually he was in remission, and he kept playing, and he got to the major leagues. He played one at-bat for the Padres and, hit the ball into left field, I guess, and that was it. He was done after that. He retired from playing baseball, and he started working in the corporate side of it. So he was with the Padres actually for a while, and then he came here to Texas, and that's how they got their slogan for the year. So it was really neat to find out, and I had no clue that they could use things like that to create a marketing campaign. My next interview was with, again, here's some pictures. Sorry. Okay. Now my next interview is with Ronnie Davis. He was the owner and CEO of the Dallas Sidekicks. He said that really what that includes is everything. He works with the marketing, and he works in the public relations and the advertising, the ticket sales, everything. So I really learned a lot from him about what it takes to run a sports team. He said that he's constantly meeting with people. When I interviewed with him, he was on his way back from a lunch meeting earlier, and he says that it really keeps him busy. He loves it, and one thing he said that really stuck with me was that anyone can work in sports if you work hard enough. And this really stems from the fact that when he first got out of college, he knew that he wanted to work in sports, so he showed up to where the Texas Rangers actually were having their spring training, and he gave his resume, which was relatively blank, to someone that looked like they were in charge, and he said that they just laughed at him. He wasn't very qualified, just out of college, but someone saw that, and he said, my son is the head of security. They can get you in the door. So that's what he did. He took the job as a security guard, and he worked his way up, and now he owns his own team. So it just goes to show that you may have to start with an entry-level position, but you can really get up there if you work hard. My fourth interview was with Christy Nelson, the director of marketing for the Texas Legends. So she says that in minor league sports, you really get to do a little bit of everything as compared to the major leagues where it's more specialized. So she gets to work in the newsletters, the press releases, public relations, sponsorship sales, things like that. So another big thing is what she has to do. She has to coordinate with the Mavs, since they're their minor league companion, I guess. They work a lot together, and she'll coordinate the Legends events with what the Mavs are doing, and she said it's really crazy to do that sometimes, but it's a lot of fun. She gets to do something new every day. And she also just started working with the USA Futsal League. She's their chief marketing officer, and she's helping them form a league expand their league in the U.S. and see if they can get more teams to come join their league, because it's not very big yet. Next, there's Texas Legends. Next, I had an interview with David Dwyer. He's the senior corporate marketing manager for the Frisco Rough Riders. So he says that the main thing he gets to do is meet with C-level executives and create corporate sponsorships. So obviously the Rough Riders are partnered with Dr. Pepper, hence why we have Dr. Pepper Ballpark. But they're also partnered with, I think, Ford and a lot of other big name brands that help them, they get, because they have a partnership with the Rough Riders, they get advertisements there, they get suites, they get like other perks, if you will, such as season tickets, like insider events. So if the Riders host like a meet the players, they're the first ones they get to come. They can bring their families, things like that. So that's really neat for them. So that's his main job, is to coordinate that and make sure that their corporate sponsors are happy and that they want to return the next year. He told me that to get into the sports industry, a lot of times you have to start in sales, which is interesting because in some of my other interviews they said you don't have to start in sales. If you don't want to work in sales, then don't take a job there. So it's kind of interesting to see like the different perspectives, and I guess it kind of varies based on what specific industry you're in. But it was kind of conflicting, and I guess we'll see if the sales jobs are more popular or not. I don't know. Next, I had an interview with Mike Sage. He was the general manager of Mustang Sports Properties at SMU, and he is in charge of their corporate marketing and promotions. So one of the main things that he's in charge of is they have a partnership with Papa John's and Albertsons. So what their partnership with Papa John's allows them to do is every time that SMU was at home and they won, Papa John's gave like a $7 discount or something to fans who used the promo code given to SMU. So that was really neat. So it benefits, even though it's really out of their control whether the team wins or not, it's still neat to see that they're willing to reward the fans and things like that. Their next one was with Albertsons, and what they did was every time SMU scored a touchdown, Albertsons donated like $10 worth of food, I think, to a local food bank. So they would give it to people who were less fortunate and they couldn't afford it. And I thought that was really neat. And he says that they do a lot of promotions like that where it's kind of out of their control how successful it goes because it's based on the team's performance. But they can always measure like crowd reaction, things like that, to like the news of the winnings going to the food bank or Papa John's giving them a deal because SMU won. So that was really neat to see like the collegiate level marketing, how that worked, and I really had no clue how that was really operated, and so that was neat to see. My 7th interview was with Mr. Bob Berde, the Associate Communications Commissioner for the Big 12. He's in charge of the branding, marketing, and public relations for the whole Big 12, and his main focus is for wrestling and baseball. Their big campaign this year was Champions for Life. What they're really focusing on is changing the way that people think about athletic scholarships. So they are interviewing recipients of athletic scholarships that otherwise may not have been able to go to college, whether it be due to funds or things like that. So it was really neat to see how they're showcasing these amazing athletes who have been given the opportunity to take their talent to the next level because they were awarded a scholarship. So there's their campaign header. He also really talked about how they have 10 teams in the Big 12 and they have to make sure all of them are represented equally. So they can't go just, if they have a 30-second commercial, they have to make sure they have equal spots for all the teams. It can't be biased or anything like that. Okay, there's just pictures. There's the national championship trophy and just the inside. And last, I had an interview with Robin Moy, the Director of Sales and Marketing for the Dallas Cowboys. She is in charge of their sponsorships, whether it be Pepsi, Ford, AT&T, things like that. She really works on incorporating them into the Cowboys events and making sure they're getting everything they can out of their partnership with the Cowboys. That way they will renew it when the time comes for the contract to expire. She also talked about how they have different marketing techniques for females, youth, and Hispanics. She said that Charlotte Jones Anderson, who's the son of Jerry Jones, the daughter of Jerry Jones, is very involved in incorporating female fans and getting them more involved in football. And that's the last of my interviews. My mentor is Mr. Bob Berde, who works at the Big 12. He went to Florida State to get his major in sports management. While he was there, he entered with the PGA Tour, and he got to travel with them, and he was in charge of managing the volunteers, making sure they were they were getting to do work and being efficient and helping get what needed to be done. And he said that because of that, he was able to get his foot in the door at, I think, Northern Michigan, and eventually he got to come here and work for the Big 12. For my original work, I created a partnership proposal from TCU, or I just started with a Big 12 team. I didn't at the time know what I wanted to do, and I was going to pick a company that I thought could benefit from a partnership with the school I chose. So I ended up picking TCU, and what I did was I researched the area and kind of decided I wanted to do a restaurant. And I decided to pick one that was very popular with the college students, and I ended up choosing this little food truck called Salsa Limon. The students frequent there all the time, and it has really good reviews, so I thought it might be good to promote their brand at TCU and create a partnership. So there's the front. So I'm kind of going to go through these in little chunks. So these first few pages kind of go over just sort of the fan base of TCU. So the people who would be seeing these advertisements at the game. So there's like their field. It talks about their students and employees, things like that. I'm going to skip this one for a second. Here I also included like the attendance. So at each game they had an average of, they were 4% over capacity, so they were having about 47,000 people seeing at each game, at each home game. And so that's how many people would be exposed to this advertisement for Salsa Limon. They would get a lot more exposure, and obviously 47,000 people, but these really just go to show how it would benefit them exposure-wise. And then here I talked about the marketing, how it would benefit them to create a partnership, basically because they're getting that incredible amount of exposure, and they get to advertise TCU as an official partner, which could also draw in customers. So next, they would have the rights to the logo. They'd get to use it on their, say, their packaging or their menus, things like that. And then I talked about promotions that they would be able to do. So at the halftime, they could do, give away tacos or something from their menu to a certain section. In each game, they could pick a different winning section and just sort of give people a taste of what it would be like to go there in order just to promote their food and get people to frequent there, I guess. After that, I talked about the different places that they would be able to advertise. So they have up on the scoreboard, in the concourse, just over where people walk, by the concessions. I also said that maybe they could include a concession truck. They could bring one into the stadium and they could sell food to the students. And also signage in the restroom, which seems like weird, but it happens. So I went over all the places that they could include their advertisements and just see how it could really benefit them, how much they could promote their brand to the students. There's also radio commercials, and so here's all the radios that broadcast TCU's sports, and it overviews that they could have 2 30-second commercials, things like that, during the halftime, wherever the radio stations broadcast to. And they could also have ads in the game day programs. So there's an example of TCU and their ads, which could be one for Salsa Limon, should they choose to accept the partnership. And they could also run a Facebook promotion, or have an ad on their ticket website. That way they could see, all the people who buy tickets for TCU would be able to see that ad, and that would give them a lot of exposure. Lastly, I overviewed the things that they were to receive, and there's also the finances, which obviously I knew nothing about, and just kind of a plan for how they wanted things to go, when they wanted to have deadlines approved by, things finalized. So that was my original work. It was a really interesting learning experience. I had really no clue what sort of formatting to use, so I had to do a lot of research.